towards a new theory of vision. And as I understand it, he's the one that it dawned on him that by having two eyes, looking at things, we can use kind of a geometric, line to recognize how far away or how big things are. I'm not sure that he's actually right, but basically this is a stereoscopic vision point. But it's interesting because he doesn't actually think the things are there physically. It's all in our minds. So that's interesting. Why would you need that kind of convergence in order to figure out size? But we also know today, I think, the argument is that you really can't tell distance and size unless you count also your experience with those things. So you're doing both. You're actually having experience with things, and that helps teach you how to interpret how far away things are, etc. And of course, they could do experiments and play with our conceptions. Put the lines so that they look like they're behind, and actually no, they're in front. You know how they mess us up. Psychologists do that all the time to write papers and stuff. And then he also wrote the treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge. And this is the book where he's trying to point out that John Locke's thesis that we can only see, hear, taste, touch, etc. are the secondary characteristics, the phenomena, essentially. We're only aware of phenomena. And the word phenomena is Greek that means like you're carrying a lantern around with you. Did I already explain that? So if you're carrying a lantern, in the dark, the only things you can see are the things that your lantern lights up for you. So in other words, everything we see and experience is something that we see and experience because of our senses that reveal that stuff to us, right? So it's phenomena. What we're experiencing is phenomena. And he's also the one that gives us the idea that we're tabula rasa. We start off as kids without knowing anything, and then experience writes on our database, so to speak. So Berkeley points out that the idea of the primary qualities of things, which are what interact with our senses to give us a sense that they're there, very common sense for us. And so Berkeley's going to do something that's not commonsensical, and usually that's also why people kind of don't pay too much attention to George Berkeley. It's because he's going to say, if you can't hear, see, taste, touch, or anything of those primary qualities, he's just confusing us by saying that they're there. So there's no way that John Locke can say that those things are there. And so Berkeley's answer is that they're not. They're not physical things there. All that exists are the phenomena, the experience our brains are having, our minds are having. That's all there is. Esse is percipi. To be is to be perceived, right? And so that means that, well, of course, is the tree there? Wait, I'm not looking at it. Well, then it isn't there, because you can only say it's there if you're seeing it. Well, but that's so stupid, really. We all want to think, when I'm not looking at you, you're still there. That would be dumb, right? Well, so how does he answer that? Well, okay, to be is to be perceived, but we're not the only perceivers. God is the perceiver. He can see everything. There's a neat, let's see if I can find this. I'm lucky here. sometimes life is just not cooperative. YouTube. I don't think. No, that's just people reading the book. I don't want that. I want the actual video. Maybe it's German. Wow.
Achim, wer bist du eigentlich? Na, ich weiß nicht. Ich bin ich.
Woher kommt die Welt? Wer bin ich? Wer bist du? Einer meiner besten Tricks. 4 Schläge. Folge mir.
So that's the movie I want. But I wanted Barkley. Let's see. Oh, it's not going to give it to me. That's mean and rotten. All right. Well, I'll give up. Shoot, it's cute. Sophie's World.
Woher kommt die Welt?
Darn it. Sorry, I'm not being very. Is that the whole movie?
Hi, I'm Sophie, and
Nope, not it at all. Okay, so just so you know, Sophie's World is a book about a young girl whose father has become a member of the UN security forces. In fact, he's a colonel or something in the and he's away. And she's growing up home in Sweden, I believe, or Norwegian, or Norway. So he writes home, and he asks her these philosophical questions, which she gets in the mailbox. So, and it makes her think, who are you? Who am I? You know, all the questions that we're kind of messing with here. So it's basically an introductory philosophy book for young people that actually I know that certain high schools in Anchorage, one of the professors, I think at East, who had a philosophy course, he was using this book as his textbook for people. So a lot of people came to philosophy classes at UAA who had taken that philosophy course at East, and that got them interested, and so they were all familiar with this book. But the scene where she literally ends up meeting Barkley, that's just kind of a neat scene. And Barkley's, kind of weird and eerie, and they're on a dark little island, and he's asking her, are you real? And she says, I think so. What about what makes the table real? It's hardness, etc. And no, it's all in the mind of God, etc. So not very commonsensical for us. And so most people, don't really think about Barkley as that significant. He is a significant person on the way to David Hume. And the reason for that is, as we'll see next class, because David Hume is who we're going to do next. And David Hume is going to come along and point out that Barkley is right about everything except one thing, the mind of God business. That's totally wrong. Where does he get that? Where did that come from? That's actually as dumb as Locke's material world, right? If an empiricist, a British empiricist, knows only what they're experiencing at the moment, then the only thing I can know is what I'm experiencing at the moment. And it gets worse, because if I say, well, I know I'm Bill Jamison, 206-428-256, don't remember that, because you're not supposed to give out your social security number. Born August 19th, 1951. I still have the postcard that my parents draw the line and say this is the room where we had our honeymoon. So I figure that's the room where I became a blastocyst or whatever you start off as, and so on. Jung would point out to me that that's all in my memory. My mother, the picture I have of my mother is essentially my memory. And none of that counts as knowledge in the sense of what I'm experiencing at the moment. Because a strict British empiricist says the only thing you really know for sure is what you're experiencing right now, right this minute. And so anything that we're dependent on our memories for, do you remember stuff? Have you ever made a mistake? Are you sure? How do you know? You remember making the mistake. Well, you might be wrong about that. Sorry, that's just an interesting paradox, isn't it? How do I know I made mistakes? I remember making a mistake. You can't trust your memory. And so, David Hume points out, I don't have grounds for saying that I'm a persistent self. How do I know I'm still me? Well, I've always been me. How do you know? Well, I remember it. I remember being me yesterday. I remember me being me when I woke up this morning, when I was driving in listening to the music and looking at a license plate, and I think, I gotta remember that license plate. And then I forgot it. Because, it was kind of an interesting license plate. I'm still trying to remember it, actually. But in any case, I don't have grounds for arguing that I'm a persistent self. Which, by the way, if you look at one of the questions I have in test 3, one of the questions I ask is number 6. What is a person? What is it? What is a person?
Depends on who you ask.
That's terrible, though. I mean, are we all persons? Who here is not a person?
Depends on what you identify as.
There's actually one person in the room that arguably might not be considered a person by some person. I would disagree with it. You would disagree with them too. That I know of. There might be others. However, I know it looks like I'm pregnant too, but actually I'm not. It's a tumor.
It's not a tumor.
It's not a tumor. I screwed it up. How did I screw that up? My memory.
That's what you're saying.
Can't trust my memory. Damn it. Am I allowed to say damn it? That's what the beaver said.
Right on.
The other beavers are going, what do we do? Damn it. Okay, you know how beavers are. Sorry. I just made that up. Is that a good one? Should I use that one again? So we don't know what a person is, apparently, because it depends on who you're talking to, says David. I agree. It depends on who you're talking to, what we mean by a person. And yet at the same time, that's a really important question. Is a person
Also
the same
depends
as
on
a citizen?
It also depends on what definition you reference.
Yeah, what do we mean by a citizen?
Part of society.
That's why I like that book I've been reading, Leadership, the Warrior's Art, written by Kalenda. He goes back to the Greek where they talk about what it means to be a citizen, or like Paideia, like the, never mind.
I like, one of my favorite books on that subject is Charles Taylor's book, The Sources of the Self, because he gives a very detailed evolution of the idea of the self through the various ages from Plato on, and how it really changes as we get into modern times, where we think that a person has to be an individual that back here, back here.
Not gonna say civilized, are you?
No. I have my definition of what is a person. By the way, that picture was of my.
That's a people.
What is her relationship? She's married to a stepson of my brother.
Okay, good. I thought you were gonna say she was married to her stepson.
So she's a relative, and she's also a Facebook friend. And this was the first one. She's had two now. But in any case, so I saw that picture and I said, "Can I use that?" And she said yes. So she gave me permission, at least typographically, to use that. So I have this neat picture of a person. I mean, by my definition, that is a person. There's two persons there, actually. That's me. That's me, though. But so, what is a person? Something is defined as a person when it has all of the following characteristics. And the first one is really the main one. And just so you know, I stole this definition from two people. One who is really weird, come to think of it. That's another person who's still alive today, who I would put in the weird category, and that's Peter Singer. Peter Singer. He talks about the nature of a person. And the other person that I stole this from was John. Shoot, there goes that's the mind thing again. He's the person you have to study if you're studying law, and you're studying. Actually, I probably have it at the bottom of the. No, I didn't. Oh well. John Rawls. There you go. Sorry. It takes almost that long for me to remember something anymore. John Rawls. And John Rawls was not so much concerned about the nature of a person, but about a citizen. So this is a combination of what it means to be a citizen and a person in modern America, in our parlance, or speaking or with one another. And so a person interacts with other individuals that consider themselves as individuals, and the type of individual each is viewed by each individual as defined by the other individuals. So we're the ones that define what a person or an individual is. And so they are individuals but are dependent on one another for their sense of what that means. So we're dependent social animals, which is also the title of a book by McIntyre.
Model dependent realism.
That's yes. Number two, it's self-reflecting, or can be expected to become self-reflecting by the other individuals that actively define it as an individual. So I suppose if you're an ant, fellow ants will consider you a person if you're an ant. I'm just guessing because I don't really speak ant. I haven't had much relationships with ants, especially since I've lived here in Alaska, because there's fewer ants here than